All month long, we have celebrated Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage. We've talked about the community's rich cultural history and how we can fight back against anti-Asian hate. Education and understanding is a great place to start. And before we close out the month, I sat down with a research psychologist, a champion and a warrior for the AAPI community. She shares her perspective with us on how Denver is healing.
My name is Rochelle Espiritu, and I'm a proud Filipina immigrant. I'm a founding partner of Change Matrix, which is a small women-owned, minority-owned business. I was born in the Philippines, and my parents moved to the United States when I was a toddler. When I was in high school, I lost a dear friend of mine to suicide, and none of us in the community knew what was happening, and that made me realize in my Filipino community that there was such a stigma about talking about mental health issues. Not everyone talks about mental health in the same way. In fact, the term mental health does not even exist for some of our communities. After the Atlanta tragedy, we quickly came together and offered healing circles for the community here in Colorado because we heard from so many that there was such pain and worry. We would hear words like despair, anxiety, hopelessness. We need to draw on our cultural heritage and cultural strengths to remember that we have generations of ways of being that I think help to improve our well-being. I think the other challenge that the AAPI community faces is a lack of knowledge and awareness about the community. There was a recent study that was just done that showed that only 42% of Americans could name an Asian American. I think it's important to remember just those stories of our ancestors to help bring hope for our future. I think it's really important for organizations and leaders within organizations to be looking at their policies and even their workforce. Like, what are they doing to hire and recruit a more diverse workforce? We can do things at the individual level, where I always encourage people to share their stories. I think there's so many rich stories that our community has that are not tapped into. And so I think it's really important for parents to tell their stories to their kids, for us to be sharing them with our community and with our friends so that people learn more about Asian American and Pacific Islander history and heritage and experiences.
And taking Rochelle's advice, I want to share my Asian American culture with you. I'm Indian American, and I want to show you a few photos, a little taste of the colorful traditional clothes that I wore for celebrations as a kid growing up.
Oh my
and
goodness.
I'm so grateful for my mom and dad for keeping me connected to my roots. And I always love sharing my cultural background. And like Rochelle said, it helps the AAPI community to be seen and understood. And one memory that I have is you were learning about India in like fifth or fourth grade, and I brought my dad in to talk about India because he was born and raised there, became a doctor there, and then came to the United States and is a citizen. And you know, it's great to share my story and let people know what being Indian American looks like.
Great picture, too.
Thank you.
Yes. I said that when you walked in this morning.
Cute little girl,
talk
right?
about that.
Yeah.
You haven't changed a bit.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
It's so important, you know, here in Colorado, especially with the history of Camp Amachi down in southeastern Colorado. And now there's a bill in Congress to make that a national park.
Right.
We're going to hear a lot about that coming up over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And that is a really dark time in Asian American history, you know, when the Japanese were interned there for World War II. And you know, that's our history in Colorado, and we need to get that information out there and let people know what it was all about.
Right.
And that's going to be happening
Absolutely.
pretty big time here coming up.
I mean, we say it all the time, right? It's all about starting that conversation. And for so long, people didn't. And she was saying the same thing, you know, we just didn't talk about mental health. You know, and you know, everyone was scared after what happened in Atlanta. And so they formed these groups to talk. And sometimes that's the start of healing. Sometimes that's the start of realizing that you're not alone and being understood and seen.
Exactly. Just being education is key, and having these conversations is so important.
She was great, by the way.
I love her.
Very well spoken.
Yeah.
Yep, good story.